Questioned about intensely staring at his new fiancé's portrait, Lord Ramiro remains utterly captivated. Hoping for a successful union this time, lingering doubts heavily shadow his anxious anticipation. Bracing for disappointment, he solemnly confesses that he expects absolutely no miracles to save him. Plagued by deep insecurities, Ramiro firmly believes no woman would ever willingly marry someone as hideous as himself. Shifting the focus entirely, an unseen associate abruptly calls out to the confident Lord Falco. Pondering his upcoming marriage, Falco cruelly reflects on the true nature of his fiancée, Lady Lucrezia. Organizing his vicious thoughts, he prepares to deliver a brutally honest assessment of his bride-to-be. He dismisses her as a plain, unassuming woman who foolishly wastes her days in deep religious prayer. Sneering with intense disdain, Falco viciously compares the dull woman to a withered old crone. Mocking her social standing, he arrogantly asks his companion if they know her infamous nickname. Contrasting the two sisters, Falco openly praises the younger sibling's charming beauty over Lucrezia's profound dullness. He finally reveals Lucrezia's haunting and mocking moniker, the silver-haired maiden. Thrilled beyond measure, the charming Rosa excitedly anticipates spending the entire summer with Lord Falco. Bursting with frantic energy, Rosa eagerly calls out for her doting father to share the news. Shocked by the blatant disrespect, Lucrezia silently reminds herself that Falco is her rightful betrothed. Welcoming his favorite daughter, their father warmly acknowledges Rosa's enthusiastic and loud arrival. Alerted to the carriage's arrival, Rosa immediately scrambles outside to greet Falco before anyone else can. Clinging to her fragile position, Lucrezia anchors her battered pride in her official betrothal to Lord Falco. Disgusted by the brazen flirtation, Lucrezia silently condemns her sister's sinful interest in her future brother-in-law. Trapped by strict family dynamics, Lucrezia resigns herself to quietly enduring Rosa's selfish and reckless whims. Harboring a quiet determination, Lucrezia desperately convinces herself that she will ultimately be the chosen bride. Arriving with practiced charm, Lord Falco gracefully thanks his future in-laws for the honorable invitation. Extending a warm welcome, the patriarch officially and eagerly invites Falco into their grand estate. Dismissing all formalities, the father eagerly encourages Falco to take the overly enthusiastic Rosa out hunting. Startled by the blatant favoritism, Lucrezia visibly flinches at her father's cruel and sudden dismissal. Desperate to connect with her fiancé, Lucrezia bravely steps forward and offers to assist with the hunting expedition. Crushing her hopes instantly, her father coldly commands her to stay inside and study like a proper future wife. Stung by the harsh rejection, Lucrezia hopelessly questions her father's profoundly alienating motives. Reflecting on her painful upbringing, she acknowledges her father's relentlessly strict treatment towards her alone. Clutching onto fleeting childhood memories, she tragically recalls the single gift her father ever bestowed upon her. Rationalizing her unending misery through devout faith, she embraces this cruel alienation as a divine trial from God. Fueling her own resolve, she vows to overcome this intense suffering to eventually earn her father's elusive trust. Accepting a brief moment of solitary respite, Lucrezia quietly thanks a passing household servant. Alerted by the estate staff, Lucrezia learns that Lord Falco and Rosa have finally returned from their private hunt. Determined to fulfill her noble duty, she prepares to establish a proper and formal bond with her fiancé. Steeling her frayed nerves, Lucrezia decides to actively deepen her relationship with the elusive Lord Falco. Stepping nervously into the bustling room, Lucrezia tentatively calls out to her promised husband. Met with deafening silence, her very presence is completely ignored by the intimately laughing couple. Noticing Falco's slight pause, a manipulative Rosa sweetly asks if something is currently bothering him. Cruelly dismissing his rightful fiancé as a mere spooky hallucination, Falco turns his back on Lucrezia entirely. As the sweltering summer days endlessly drag on, Lord Falco and the charming Rosa shamelessly grow closer, their forbidden intimacy blossoming right before Lucrezia's eyes. Lost in their own private world of whispered secrets and lingering glances, the treacherous pair completely ignores the heavy atmosphere surrounding their brazen courtship. Observing their blatant display of affection from the shadows, a stoic Lucrezia seriously doubts there is a single soul in the entire sprawling estate who hasn't noticed their scandalous behavior. Fueled by naive arrogance, the foolish couple somehow genuinely believes they are being incredibly discreet with their passionate daytime rendezvous. Suffocating under the weight of her own quiet humiliation, Lucrezia desperately prays for this wretched, agonizing summer to finally come to a merciful end. Trapped in a quiet purgatory of unfulfilled expectations, she stands motionless and isolated within the grand halls of her ancestral home, her expression an impenetrable mask of sorrow. Thickening the oppressive tension in the opulent room, the inevitable confrontation silently approaches, drawing the fractured family dynamic toward a dangerous breaking point. Startling the quiet maiden out of her bleak reverie, Lord Falco abruptly breaks the suffocating silence by loudly calling out Lucrezia's name. Taken completely off guard by the incredibly unusual occurrence of her betrothed actually addressing her, a flustered Lucrezia nervously stammers as he suddenly proposes a childish game of hide-and-seek. Exerting his authority with a casual cruelty, Falco manipulates the situation by declaring that since Lucrezia knows the Grand Villa best, she must be the one to seek them first. Utterly bewildered by the bizarre and inappropriate suggestion, Lucrezia can only mentally echo the words, hide and seek, in a state of sheer disbelief. Feigning a shred of polite concern, Falco leans in with a deceptive smirk to arrogantly confirm if she is okay with his completely absurd demand. Crashing over her like a cold wave, a grim realization suddenly washes over Lucrezia as she immediately pieces together the humiliating true motive behind their playful charade. Swallowing her shattered pride with quiet dignity, she reluctantly agrees, fully understanding they intend to cruelly use her as a mere distraction so they can sneak away to be alone together. Without missing a beat, Falco enthusiastically urges Rosa to run, while the younger sister mockingly yells back at Lucrezia not to cheat, masking their betrayal behind sickeningly sweet laughter. Kicking up dust in their wake, the deceitful lovers gleefully sprint away into the expansive grounds, leaving the rightful fiancé entirely abandoned in the quiet courtyard. Refusing to stoop to their petty level, a resigned Lucrezia decides to just stand aside and let the foolish couple do exactly as they please. Rationalizing the profound humiliation to protect her fragile heart, she convinces herself this is simply another of her father's divine trials, declaring she feels absolutely nothing since she long ago buried any foolish hopes for this political marriage. Steeling her unyielding resolve against the crushing despair, she mentally assures her strict father that no matter what harsh trials come her way, she shall never falter. Banishing all thoughts of romantic love from her dutiful mind, she fiercely promises to become the perfect marshal's wife, reserving her total devotion solely for the strength of the nation and the prosperity of its people. Pushing forward with an iron will, she sharply reprimands herself, demanding that she must continue to mature and absolutely not wallow in this temporary pit of despair. Shattering her meticulously crafted reality into a million jagged pieces, a devastating revelation suddenly strikes as Lucrezia gasps in sheer horror at the news that her sacred engagement is officially broken. Delivering the crushing blow with utterly callous indifference, Falco openly confesses that he has fallen deeply in love with Rosa and has chosen to marry the younger sister instead. Desperately clinging to the rigid laws of their aristocratic society, a horrified Lucrezia respectfully but frantically protests to Lord Falco that among the high nobility, marriage is a strict matter of duty, not fleeting love. Falling like a devastating hammer, the most agonizing truth is finally revealed when she learns her exceptionally strict father has officially given his full approval to this scandalous union. Betrayed by the very patriarch who trusted her with this monumental duty, a heartbroken Lucrezia internally screams, questioning why this burden wasn't the divine trial she had so faithfully believed it to be. Paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the betrayal, her eyes widen in a silent, agonizing void as the very foundation of her entire life crumbles beneath her feet. Surrendering to the absolute patriarchal authority that has governed her entire existence, a defeated Lucrezia softly murmurs her compliance, conceding that if this is her father's final decision, she possesses absolutely no right to oppose it. Adding insult to the fatal injury, a completely oblivious Falco casually thanks her, expressing a wildly inappropriate hope that they can remain on good terms simply because he doesn't actively dislike her. Attempting to placate the woman he just discarded, Falco carelessly mentions that the Duke is already actively seeking a brand new, suitable match for her to marry. Shifting her immediate panic from her own ruined future to the grim fate of the entire country, Lucrezia deeply agonizes over the terrifying prospect of the childish Rosa becoming the Marshal's incredibly powerful wife. Gripped by an overwhelming sense of dread, she stares blankly ahead, quietly confessing her profound concern for the dark future that awaits their unsuspecting territory. Recognizing the massive gravity of the Marshal's command over the entire national army, Lucrezia calculates that if his future wife lacks immense political and social finesse, the entire nation could be plunged into catastrophic jeopardy. Acutely aware that both Rosa and the notoriously unreliable Falco are utterly incapable of managing complex diplomacy or surviving treacherous court life, Lucrezia realizes this exact incompetence was precisely why she was originally chosen. Embracing her ultimate, self-sacrificing duty as a true daughter of the realm, the discarded fiancé silently vows to support the incompetent couple from the shadows with absolutely everything she has. Surrounded by a swarm of sycophantic nobles, a radiant Rosa soaks in the excessive flattery as they excitedly praise her flawless beauty, her thrilling new engagement, and Falco's supposed lifelong devotion. Twisting Lucrezia's noble intentions into a vile caricature, an ungrateful Rosa viciously complains to her admirers about how arrogant her older sister is for attempting to teach her how to be a proper marshal's wife. Hearing the poisonous rumors swirling through the estate, Lucrezia is struck by the painful reality of exactly what her cruel younger sister is claiming behind her back. Reveling in her newfound power and ultimate victory, a triumphant Rosa shamelessly whines to her captivated audience that her older sister is simply the absolute worst person in the world. Interrupting his own distracted thoughts, Falco suddenly pauses with a curious murmur as the energetic Rosa happily calls out his name across the bustling room. Gossiping viciously behind her back, Rosa's friends mock Lucrezia for showing absolutely no reaction to her shattered engagement. Sweating nervously, Falco worries he spoke too soon without formal parental approval, while the girls agree Lucrezia's stoicism is totally creepy. Brushing off his rising panic, the deceitful Falco reassures himself that since only Rosa's friends are present, his bold claim will be completely fine. Refusing to abandon her familial duties, a stern Lucrezia diligently attempts to teach the spoiled Rosa proper high society table manners. Lecturing with perfect poise, she explains that true nobility never touch their hair or skin during meals, a rigid rule separating them from the nouveau riche. Furious at the constant corrections, Rosa angrily lashes out, screaming that she isn't a child anymore and just wants to eat in peace. Storming away from the dining table, the bratty younger sister loudly whines for their doting father. Feigning victimhood, Rosa falsely cries that her sister is bullying her again, prompting the cruel patriarch to dismiss Lucrezia as merely bitter. Staring down his eldest daughter with absolute zero warmth, the Duke abruptly announces that they have already arranged her next political marriage. Cackling with malicious glee, Rosa reveals Lucrezia is being shipped off to Ramiro Pastor, the infamous, ugly Duke, plagued by 6 broken engagements and gruesome rumors. Dismissing the horrific rumors as mere exaggerations, the father coldly confirms the Pastor family instantly accepted the proposal because she is still a royal princess. Taunting her stoic sister, a grinning Rosa asks if she's terrified, cruelly urging her to cry all she wants because absolutely no one will save her. Meeting their cruelty with unbreakable resolve, a fierce Lucrezia intensely vows that she shall not shed a single tear. Standing tall against her family's relentless scorn, Lucrezia silently hardens her heart to face whatever dark fate awaits her. Barking his final, callous orders, the Duke commands his discarded daughter to prepare herself for the carriage arriving in merely 3 days. Invading Lucrezia's private quarters, a smug Rosa mocks her sister's grim fate of marrying a deformed noble whose hideous face regularly plagues the newspapers. Completely ignoring the venomous taunts, Lucrezia casually munches on a snack and suddenly hands a beautiful box to her bewildered younger sibling. Peering inside the ornate container, a shocked Rosa immediately recognizes her sister's dazzling, precious gemstones. Maintaining her serene composure, Lucrezia calmly explains she must leave them behind because their greedy father decreed all her belongings remain with the ducal house. Throwing her hands up in ecstatic triumph, the selfish Rosa instantly forgets her insults and cheers over the free, luxurious loot. Gently relinquishing her treasured past, Lucrezia softly implores her sister to take good care of the dazzling jewels. Disgusted by her sister's saintly forgiveness, Rosa violently snaps, accusing Lucrezia of sickening self-righteousness while the older sibling genuinely wishes for her happiness. Screaming in absolute frustration, the younger sister demands to know why Lucrezia never gets angry, branding her unwavering calmness as incredibly creepy. Glaring with unbridled contempt, Rosa finally storms out of the quiet room, unable to break her sister's impenetrable spirit. Watching the brat depart without a shred of resentment, Lucrezia silently affirms that Rosa will always be her deeply cherished little sister. As Lucrezia finally steps out the door, her unforgiving father coldly commands her never to return, officially banishing her from their lives forever. Turning her back on the toxic estate, Lucrezia internally pities her father's profound and cruel foolishness. Embracing her eternal exile with quiet grace, she calmly agrees to stay away for as long as the Duke truly needs her by his side. Screaming from the high balcony, a spiteful Rosa desperately tries to break her sister one last time by shouting about the misery of marrying the ugly Duke. Gazing up with an unbothered smile, Lucrezia peacefully counters the venom by declaring she firmly believes it is a fine match. Boiling with impotent rage, Rosa furiously screams that reality will become her living nightmare, viciously ordering her to keep dreaming. Leaving the sprawling manor and her abusive family far behind, the ornate carriage carries the discarded princess toward an entirely unknown destiny. Rolling steadily through the changing landscape, the heavy wheels push forward into the ominous territory of the Pastor Duchy. Dismissing the terrifying rumors of his grotesque appearance, Lucrezia firmly decides that only the ugly Duke's true heart truly matters. Embracing this new land and fiancé as her next divine trial, the devout maiden fiercely vows to fill her future husband's life with boundless love. Meanwhile, back at the bustling estate, Falco's stunned friends can hardly believe Lucrezia is already engaged to the infamous ugly Duke. While one friend condemns the cruel arrangement, Falco casually argues it is a perfectly fitting punishment for his gloomy, depressing former fiancé. Though they mock her dull personality, the shallow men reluctantly admit that Lucrezia is actually quite the striking beauty. Hatching a deeply vile and arrogant scheme, Falco decides he will comfort a miserable Lucrezia later, planning to keep Rosa as his legal wife and her sister as a secret mistress. Far away in the shadowy halls of the Pastor Duchy, a sharply dressed servant formally answers the mysterious Lord Ramirio's summons. Deep in conversation, Duke Ramirio Pastor and his confidant seriously analyze the sudden marriage proposal from the Sarave family. Reviewing the documents, they note the prospective bride is highly educated with absolutely no scandalous stains on her noble character. Attempting to make sense of the situation, the aide explains her previous engagement was broken because her fiancé suddenly chose her sister, though they find it suspicious coming from a prestigious branch of the Illuminati royal family. Suspicious of her motives, they deeply question why a noble lady sought after by great nations would ever willingly choose their backwater duchy. Fearing a trap, the aide draws a dark parallel to notorious con artists who use beautiful women to steal entire territories and vast assets. Acknowledging the harsh reality, Ramirio frankly admits his own doubts, painfully aware that he is widely known as the infamous Ugly Duke. Interrupting his grim thoughts, Ramirio finds himself inexplicably captivated by something entirely unexpected. Gazing at her portrait, he softly admits that despite paintings often being flattering, she is undeniably stunning. Regaining his composure, Ramirio cautiously orders his trusted aide to gather more extensive information about this mysterious woman before making any final decisions. Presenting a massive stack of compiled intelligence, the efficient aide reveals she is locally known by the haunting moniker, the Silver-Haired Maiden. Reading the dark rumors, the aide details claims that the maiden is mentally unwell, relentlessly bullied her sister out of jealousy, and allegedly tried to murder both her ex-fiancé and her own father when the engagement ended. Absorbing the horrifying gossip, Ramirio solemnly remarks that such vicious allegations constitute quite the terrifying reputation. Flipping to the next page, the aide quickly notes that despite the dark rumors, there are also those who fiercely defend her and speak highly of her impressive talents. Highlighting her incredible linguistic skills, the report confirms she has served as a brilliant court interpreter since childhood, though the exact details remain heavily classified. Comparing her situation to his own, Ramirio points out that brutal rumors are often completely unreliable, just like the baseless claims that he is a monstrous serial killer. Trying to lighten the heavy mood, the cheerful aide jokingly promises a massive celebration when this seventh engagement inevitably fails just like the rest. Annoyed by the pessimistic humor, Ramirio forcefully tells his aide to stop constantly planning for his absolute failure. Softening his harsh tone, Ramirio admits he understands the aide's protective cynicism, dismissing the idea that he still cares about being constantly rejected. Reflecting on his initial motivation, Ramirio confesses he only proposed because he thought he could offer her some small comfort in her misery, fully expecting to be rejected because of his infamous title. Pausing for a moment, the usually sharp aide stares blankly at the Duke, thoroughly surprised by his unexpectedly tender reasoning. Breaking the awkward silence, Ramirio nervously asks if he said something incredibly strange or inappropriate. Scolding him affectionately, the aide declares it pitiful that someone as genuinely kind as Ramirio isn't already happily married, just as another servant urgently arrives with a letter. Startled by the sudden intrusion, Ramiro quickly turns his attention to the servant delivering an unexpected message from the Duke of Cerva. Reading the urgent missive, a shocked Ramiro learns that Lucrezia has already left her territory and will arrive at his estate in merely a few days. Outraged by the sheer audacity, Ramiro furiously complains that this rushed arrival is completely unreasonable since they haven't even finalized the basic engagement terms yet. Scanning the rest of the letter, Ramiro sighs heavily as her father falsely claims the court rumors have ruined her mental state, necessitating a rapid departure. Accepting the difficult situation, Ramiro decides they have absolutely no choice but to accommodate her, prioritizing her immediate rest and recovery. Formulating a quick plan, Ramiro decides to house her in their oldest, grandest palace, hoping the ancient architecture might impress a young lady from Illuminati. Barking frantic orders, the panicked aide commands the staff to immediately prepare her chambers, insisting they spare absolutely no expense for their noble guest. Teasing his master, the aide points out that despite the chaotic rush, Ramiro seems genuinely excited about his sudden bride's arrival. Blushing slightly, Ramiro quickly dismisses the teasing and loudly orders everyone to get back to work because they are entirely out of time. Staring thoughtfully out the window, Ramiro quietly admits to himself that harboring a tiny bit of hope isn't so terrible, even if he firmly believes he knows exactly how this tragic engagement will ultimately end. Meanwhile, the ornate Cerva carriage rolls steadily over the final hill, finally arriving within the vast borders of the Pastor Duchy. Peering excitedly out the small window, Lucrezia watches the passing scenery with wide, curious eyes. Taking in the beautiful sights, a calm Lucrezia softly acknowledges that this unfamiliar territory is indeed the infamous Pastor Duchy. Amazed by the lively streets, she marvels at the massive crowds and the vibrant energy of the incredibly bustling city. Intrigued by the prosperous environment, Lucrezia wonders aloud how the Duke governs such a thriving land, deciding she must ask for a proper tour later. Gazing up at the towering architecture, Lucrezia silently accepts that this grand, ancient palace is now her permanent new home. Stepping out of the carriage with perfect grace, the beautiful silver-haired maiden is immediately greeted by a massive assembly of entirely stunned palace staff. Staring in absolute disbelief at the beautiful woman, a bewildered servant quietly questions if this stunning lady is truly meant for the infamous ugly Duke. Observing her mysterious new host, Lucrezia notes that he does not seem peculiar at all, though she cannot see his face. Staring intently at the dark fabric, she silently wonders if his concealed visage is the true reason he is called the ugly Duke. Breaking the silence with quiet dignity, Ramiro formally introduces himself while politely asking for her understanding regarding his ever-present hood. Bowing with graceful respect, the young lady officially introduces herself as Lucrezia Cerva to her towering fiancé. Meeting her unwavering gaze, Ramiro pauses slightly as he takes in the sight of his stunning new guest. Keeping his face entirely hidden, Ramiro gently murmurs that maintaining his disguise is truly for her own sake. Captivated by his surprisingly gentle demeanor, a profoundly intrigued Lucrezia closely studies the imposing man standing before her. Analyzing his deep insecurities, she suddenly realizes he might have simply been rejected too often by cruel society. Feeling a surge of empathy, she theorizes that he has endured terrible pain from being continuously cast aside by others. Shifting the conversation, Ramiro solemnly presumes that his new bride is already well aware of his infamous nickname. Confirming her knowledge, a relieved Lucrezia openly declares that the monstrous rumors in the newspapers were clearly complete nonsense. Chuckling softly at her honest remark, Ramiro agrees that those vicious articles painted him as some kind of terrifying monster. Seizing the vulnerable moment, Lucrezia boldly steps forward and asks if he would finally permit her to see beneath his dark hood. Instantly retreating into his shell, a deeply ashamed Ramiro firmly declines, refusing to deliberately unsettle such a refined young lady. Swiftly changing the sensitive subject, Ramiro curiously points out that she seemingly arrived with only a single carriage. Surveying the meager luggage, the confused Duke asks if the rest of her noble belongings will be arriving later. Shaking her head firmly, Lucrezia shocks her host by declaring that absolutely no further belongings will be arriving. Refusing to let her father seize her wealth, she confidently reveals she brought all her private securities and personal assets instead. Impressed by her highly practical city noble efficiency, Ramiro happily agrees to safely escort her to a local bank soon. Offering her immediate hospitality, Ramiro gently encourages the exhausted traveler to rest while serving her a truly delicious meal. Deeply moved by his profound courtesy, Lucrezia silently thanks him, having half expected her cruel father to toss her into a stable. Vowing to firmly support this wonderfully kind man as his rightful wife, she watches as he slides a formal agreement across the table. Glancing down at the crisp parchment, she prepares to read the binding terms of their brand new political union. Gesturing toward the document, Ramiro politely requests that she review the strict conditions and sign if she finds them acceptable. Reading the shocking text, Lucrezia discovers the marriage agreement merely states Ramiro will temporarily host her strictly for her physical and mental recovery. Elaborating on the temporary terms, Ramiro gently explains that she will only remain in pastor territory for a few months before returning home. Utterly stunned by the official declaration, a bewildered Lucrezia realizes this compassionate duke possesses absolutely no intention of actually marrying her. Masking her rising panic, she silently embraces this crushing misfortune as her next great trial, knowing she truly has nowhere else to go. Desperately seeking immediate clarification, Lucrezia frantically asks the calm duke if a massive misunderstanding has somehow derailed their entire arrangement. Maintaining her stoic composure so she doesn't appear peculiar, she firmly insists that these temporary terms were absolutely not her family's true intention. Explaining his noble reasoning, Ramiro confesses he simply assumed she was deeply distressed by her broken engagement and desperately needed peaceful rest. Downplaying his own immense worth, the Duke gently suggests she doesn't need to marry a man like him and should instead make a triumphant return to court. Highlighting his string of 6 broken engagements, the self-deprecating ugly Duke assures her that society will easily believe any excuse she invents to leave. Continuing his awkward rambling, the massive man nervously stammers that he has done absolutely nothing dishonorable during his isolated reign. Bursting into the room with comedic rage, the loyal aide Bosco angrily reprimands his flustered lord for engaging in such vulgar talk. Recovering his composure, Ramiro gently insists this temporary arrangement protects her precious reputation while finally giving him a much-needed break from endless proposals. Overwhelmed by his remarkably sensitive and compassionate nature, Lucrezia forcefully declares that she came to this territory strictly to become his wife. Realizing what a truly wonderful man he is in person, she desperately wonders how she can properly convey her rapidly growing affection to him. Staring directly at his hooded visage, a determined Lucrezia formally begs for his hand in marriage and demands to see his true face. Overwhelmed by her fierce declaration, a flustered Ramiro abruptly postpones the discussion and calls for Bosco to immediately assign her a personal butler. Gripped by intense paranoia, Ramiro frantically wonders if this overly convenient marriage proposal is just a massive scam. Pacing the room, Ramiro declares the sudden arrangement is far too convenient, prompting Bosco to question his master's intense suspicion. Thrilled by their guest, the loyal aide gushes over the flawless beauty who looks even lovelier in person than her portraits. Refusing to believe a fairy tale, the hideous ugly duke furiously rejects the idea that a flawless beauty would ever willingly propose to him. Staring blankly at his spiraling master, Bosco realizes the deep-seated paranoia utterly consuming the traumatized nobleman. Snapping into action, Ramiro harshly commands his aide to thoroughly investigate the Sarave family's finances to uncover her true motives. Haunted by her warm words, the cynical duke flashes back to Lucrezia genuinely calling him a truly wonderful man. Heart pounding wildly in his chest, Ramiro desperately vows not to be fooled by such transparent, manipulative flattery. Meanwhile, a distressed Lucrezia sits quietly in her opulent room, dreading the terrifying predicament of her sudden arrival. Breaking her grim thoughts, Sebastian the butler politely knocks and asks if the young lady required his immediate assistance. Flustered by her meager wardrobe, she anxiously admits she brought absolutely nothing suitable to wear for a formal dinner. Smiling warmly, the gentle butler immediately assures the esteemed guest of honor that she needn't concern herself with such trivial matters. Despite the servant's kind reassurance, a deeply nervous Lucrezia still wonders if her plain attire will truly be acceptable. Arriving at the grand dining hall, she gasps in shock upon realizing Lord Ramiro is wearing the exact same casual clothes as earlier. Standing awkwardly in the opulent room, the massive duke remains fully concealed beneath his dark, imposing hood. Apologizing softly for his lack of finery, Ramiro bitterly claims a grotesque face like his never-suited elegant clothing. Touched by his profound consideration, Lucrezia instantly realizes he deliberately dressed down to make her feel perfectly comfortable. A radiant smile graces her face before she quickly reprimands herself for such an improper display of emotion. Catching a fleeting glimpse of her suppressed joy, the hooded Duke finds her genuine reaction undeniably endearing. Snapping back to his bitter reality, Ramiro instantly suspects her charming smile is just another weapon in a malicious ploy. Reminding himself of his territory's immense wealth, he knows his highly prosperous land attracts endless waves of greedy marriage proposals. Convinced she will inevitably flee upon seeing his hidden face, he bitterly concludes she is just like everyone else who never truly chose him. Masking his deep insecurities, he formally agrees to arrange her requested bank visit while silently vowing to break the engagement at the first sign of greed. Miles away in the Cerave territory, a furious Rosa violently screams that her recent tea party was absolutely horrid. Throwing a massive childish tantrum, the spoiled girl aggressively demands her father drive all her critics out of the royal court. Striding into the chaotic room, Duke Cerave calmly orders his hysterical younger daughter to control her explosive temper. Staring down the weeping girl, the stern patriarch demands to know exactly what disaster occurred at the tea party. Flashing back to the event, snooty noblewomen viciously murmur about Rosa's vulgar, commoner-like habit of touching her hair during a meal. Infuriated by their whispers, an arrogant Rosa loudly declares she ignores basic etiquette because her royal bloodline elevates her above such rules. Unfazed by her outburst, a dignified older noblewoman gently explains that true nobility requires speaking to others with supreme grace and humility. Humiliated by the public scolding, a sobbing Rosa complains to her father that the harsh criticism was completely cruel and unfair. Whispering behind their fans, the mocking ladies ruthlessly deduce that the towering Rosa behaves exactly like an undisciplined 8-year-old child in disguise. Back in the present, Rosa fumes with childish indignation while her calculating father silently processes the disastrous social fallout. Gazing at his foolish daughter, Duke Cerave solemnly wishes the insulting noble's harsh assessment were actually true. Fearing for the nation's future, the gossiping ladies express dread over such an uncultured girl becoming the next marshal's wife. Infuriated by the blatant disrespect toward his family, a coldly furious duke resolves to draft a royal petition to crush the insolent old hags. Specifically targeting her primary critic, a weeping Rosa violently screams that Countess Tilia humiliated her endlessly. Boiling with unchecked rage, the spoiled girl declares it completely unforgivable for a mere countess to defy someone of her royal bloodline. Shocked by the devastating name, her father freezes in pure terror as he reveals Countess Tilia is actually the walking royal protocol, who holds the highest rank in the nation. Utterly clueless to the apocalyptic social danger, a bewildered Rosa blankly asks what that intimidating title actually means for her ruined reputation. A man fiercely scolds Rosa for her ridiculous bullying. He demands she reflect on her behavior and learn proper decorum. He reminds her that her greatest strength has always been her smile. He questions what is wrong with her since she used to make friends with ease. Rosa tearfully realizes that people only treat her kindly because of her smile. She knows that is the only reason they let her do as she pleases. The man angrily asks if she thought no countess would oppose royal blood. She arrogantly replies that they have always been beneath her. Furious, he declares the court is no fairy tale and accuses her of reading too many cheap operas. He vows this will be her lesson. Shocked to her core, Rosa wonders in pure disbelief if her father just scolded her. He commands Rosa not to neglect her manners. He echoes her sister's warning that etiquette is the most crucial aspect of noble society. Rosa cries out for him to stop saying awful things. He coldly insists she must endure this minor scandal until the court forgets it. Blaming her sister and crying over her cruel father, she stubbornly insists she did nothing wrong. She desperately wishes she had met Lord Falco first. Her father notices someone is missing again and wonders if the servants are slacking off. He remarks that they were not there to greet them earlier either. Exhausted from the ordeal, Rosa announces she will rest now. She demands something delicious for tomorrow to lift her ruined spirits. A heavy, silent atmosphere settles over the grand halls as she slowly walks away. The estate staff reviews employment contracts in confusion. They have received formal notice from someone acting on Lucrezia's behalf regarding a sudden change in employer. The blunt notice states that if they refuse to sign, severance will be paid. The entire household staff will be dismissed at once. The father angrily dismisses this nonsense as Lucrezia's problem, not his. He aggressively orders his men to summon her immediately. A nervous servant informs him that the young lady has already departed for her territory. Her carriage arrived 3 days ago. Shocked, the father realizes Lucrezia had been covering the staff's wages herself. He wonders aloud how she was managing such a massive expense. Desperate to maintain control, he commands his servants to borrow money immediately. He refuses to let the estate fall into ruin. He mutters that she is exactly like her mother. He arrogantly assumes commoners will queue up to lend them money because they possess royal blood. He bitterly recalls that the previous Duke of Surrey, her father, was a notorious philanderer. That man had racked up immense, crippling debts. To pay off those massive debts, he was all but forced into a corner. He had to marry Lucrezia's mother, a wealthy merchant's daughter. Resentment boils within him as he reflects on his past. He never had a single say in the forced marriage. He grudgingly admits her dowry saved the house, but he finds her commoner blood revolting. He believes it defiles his pure royal line. He remembers the tragic day his wife perished. He notes with cold detachment that the child somehow survived. Viewing her mere existence as a cruel punishment, he took drastic measures. He banished the young girl to the unforgiving mountains. He assumed the fragile child would perish completely alone. He left her in the wilderness without a second thought. To his absolute shock, Lucrezia returned 8 years later. Raised by her wet nurse, she stood before him once again. Seeing her silver hair mirroring his own, he wondered how she found her way back. She should not have even known she belonged to him. Deeply unsettled by her haunting presence, he glares into the distance. He darkly wishes she would just disappear forever. Elsewhere, a sharply dressed man assures Lucrezia that the matter of future payments is resolved. Lucrezia politely thanks the man for his efficient services. He respectfully hands over the requested amount in physical cash. She asks to retrieve the contents of her safe in Illuminati. The man regretfully informs her that it will not be possible. He explains that the high-security vault cannot be accessed by proxy. She will need to travel there in person to claim her items. Unfazed by the setback, Lucrezia nods in understanding. She politely thanks him for the clear clarification. Exhausted by the banks, she asks Sebastian for his help once they return to the estate. She knows there is much to do and she must press on. A lively tailor excitedly greets Lucrezia at the boutique. She instantly recognizes her as the Duke of Pastor's new fiancé. The tailor gushes over Lucrezia's stunning silver hair and offers daring new styles. She proudly boasts that she can make absolutely anything. Lucrezia admits she has never worn flashy clothes due to the Divina Fate's teachings on modesty. She timidly asks what style her future husband prefers so she can dress up for his sake. The tailor smiles brightly at the hesitant girl. She confidently declares that she has just the right idea for her new look. A cloaked figure smirks dangerously from the deep shadows. He calmly addresses his lord as a new scheme begins to unfold. Flustered by the sudden arrangement, she stammers in disbelief, asking the lord if he truly intends to become her husband. He casually confirms her question, agreeing to the marriage and asking what is on her mind. Gathering her courage, she nervously asks him to reveal what sort of clothing he actually prefers. She explains that she wants to have a dress custom-made to perfectly match his personal tastes. Flustered by her dedication, he desperately insists that she should wear whatever she likes, noting that her current simple attire already highlights the high quality of the fabric. Touched by his gentle reassurance, she smiles warmly and calls his sweet words truly delightful. Relieved, she admits she also prefers simpler attire, leaving him awkwardly agreeing that they share similar tastes. Apologizing for disturbing his work, she quickly excuses herself and promises to see him at dinner. Meeting with the tailor, she requests a modest dress in muted gray or brown tones with minimal lace and frills. Suddenly, a mysterious woman interrupts the fitting, politely asking the madam for a quick word. The woman reveals that she can offer helpful advice regarding her future husband's true preferences. Claiming to have known him since childhood, the woman insists she knows everything about the Lord and his secret desires. She confidently explains that he has always secretly adored elegant, highly ornate clothing on women. She reveals that his 6 broken engagements gave him an intense fear of rejection, making beautiful women feel like a mirage forever out of his reach. Promising that he would fall for her instantly, the woman urges her to wear fashionable, feminine attire to win his heart. She specifically suggests soft hues like blue-gray or pistachio green, recommending a delicate touch of lace or frills to highlight her femininity. Inspired by the advice, the newly energized fiancé vows to do her absolute best as the tailor enthusiastically presents a fresh design. She warmly thanks the woman for her incredibly helpful advice, her eyes sparkling with newfound hope. The woman introduces the loyal servant beside her as Bosco, prompting the madam to graciously ask for his name as well. She explains that Bosco serves as a general assistant in the family service, handling tasks that require special attention. Expressing deep gratitude to everyone, she beams with genuine happiness while an unseen figure violently groans in disgust. Elsewhere, a furious man angrily slams a terrible meal on the table, demanding to know why the food is cold and scarce. The frantic servants explain that the chef suddenly quit and they are still desperately searching for a replacement. Realizing they failed to secure funds from stingy lenders, the angry noble watches in shock as another servant quits over unpaid wages. A furious commoner strikes the arrogant noble, cursing him as a disgrace for hiding behind the royal name and abusing Lady Lucrezia. Back at the estate, Rosa complains to her father about not receiving any recent letters, angrily ordering him to throw the insolent commoner into the dungeon. Her nervous father stammers awkwardly, trying to find a way to explain the sudden halt in their correspondence. He realizes that the fool he just ordered imprisoned had been secretly intercepting their letters all along. Rosa discovers an invitation from the powerful Rye Kingdom addressed solely to her sister Lucrezia, furiously demanding to know why the embassy ignored her, the new fiancé. Her father explains that the engagement hasn't been officially annulled yet, meaning Lucrezia's status remains intact until the Marshal's family returns. Smug and overconfident, Rosa volunteers to respond to the invitation herself to prove she is fully capable of handling diplomacy. Her father proudly agrees, boasting that her high-born mother gives her the refined edge over her common-blooded sister. Eager to prove her superiority, Rosa prepares to review foreign etiquette, completely convinced she will soon dominate court functions. Meanwhile, Lucrezia marvels at the magnificent library within the Duchy of Pastor, deeply awed by its vast trove of rare and ancient books. A voice notes how much she seems to enjoy the breathtaking room as she eagerly wonders which book she should read today. She turns in surprise and happily greets Lord Ramiro as he enters the grand library. Brimming with joy, she expresses her deep gratitude for the access he granted her, overwhelmed by the sheer number of fascinating books. She enthusiastically praises a thrilling account of a past hero fighting dark mages, calling the vivid story absolutely enthralling. She excitedly mentions discovering an ancient journal written by a former head of his house from over a century ago. Intrigued by her passion, Ramiro gently agrees to let her summarize the most exciting parts for him sometime. Ramiro praises Lucrezia for fluently reading their language, prompting her to humbly mention her past lessons. Lucrezia passionately expresses her grand hope to one day write a journal to pass down to future generations. Relieved by her enthusiasm, Ramiro states he is genuinely glad she isn't bored. He warmly offers to plan a trip to the city for opera and shopping or a scenic ride to the mountains. Surprised by his focus on her, Lucrezia curiously asks how Lord Ramiro usually spends his own time. Ramiro admits he rarely leaves the estate due to a strong dislike of crowds, suggesting the wilderness instead. Lucrezia excitedly reveals her love for camping, wondering aloud if the rough outdoors would be suitable. She vividly imagines the absolute delight of roasting fresh-caught river fish and crisped bacon over an open fire. Impressed by her hunting knowledge, Ramiro agrees to a daytime horseback outing to the mountains to hunt plentiful game birds. A quiet moment passes as the two finalize their exciting plans for the upcoming horseback excursion. Walking alone later, Lucrezia happily admits to herself how much she truly enjoyed speaking with Lord Ramiro today. A silent moment of profound reflection washes over her as she slowly contemplates her growing romantic feelings. Grounding her rising hopes, she firmly resolves not to rush things and lets a soft denial escape her lips. She quietly acknowledges that the only remaining step is for Ramiro to officially propose to her. Later, a cheerful tailor enthusiastically presents Lucrezia with her newly finished, custom-made dress. Anticipation building in her heart, Lucrezia eagerly looks forward to debuting her new look over the weekend. The intricate, elegant details of the stunning new dress finally come into full, breathtaking view. Mesmerized by the craftsmanship, Lucrezia softly calls it beautiful while the proud tailor boasts it is her finest work. Overwhelmed with deep emotion, Lucrezia marvels that such an adorable garment was made entirely for her. The tailor insists she debut it at tonight's dinner, immediately ordering and to help the young lady get ready. Grateful for the assistance, Lucrezia politely asks and to redo her hair before putting on the dress. And hesitates slightly, gently broaching the sensitive subject of her mistress's current hairstyle. Suggesting a modern half-up style, and explains that leaving one's hair down is the current reigning trend. Lucrezia insecurely compares her silver locks to an old woman's hair, fearing it will fall forward awkwardly during dinner. Haunted by past insults calling her a pitiful crone, Lucrezia anxiously doubts her own unique appearance, and firmly reassures her that white hair is revered as a sign of intelligence in Pastor, begging Lucrezia to trust her. Downstairs, an impatient man reminds Ramiro that it takes time for a lady to properly prepare for an evening. A soft, hesitant voice suddenly echoes from the top of the grand staircase, drawing everyone's attention. Stepping nervously into the warm light, Lucrezia shyly announces that her dress has been fully completed. Gripping the delicate fabric, she looks down and quietly asks the stunned room how she looks. Doubt clouds her mind as she fears the flashy dress cannot hide her gloomy eyes from Lord Ramiro. Staring in stunned silence, Ramiro struggles to find his words while Lucrezia bitterly resigns herself to being the silver-haired maiden. A heavy pause stretches between them as the crushing weight of her insecurities threatens to ruin the delicate moment. Breaking the agonizing silence, Ramiro finally breathes out that the dress looks absolutely lovely on her. The tailor excitedly agrees, while a blushing Ramiro confirms that she looks undeniably adorable in the new attire. Shocked by his genuine praise, Lucrezia gazes back at the lord with wide, tear-filled eyes. Ramiro gently praises her silver hair, calling it a beautiful, shining feature that completely captivates him. For the first time in her life, Lucrezia smiles warmly, realizing she might actually love her radiant silver hair. Meanwhile, back at her family estate, Rosa bursts into the room with a loud, dramatic creak of the door. Ignoring her father's reminder about her wardrobe, Rosa excitedly demands a special new dress for her formal engagement announcement to Lord Falco. Furious that she didn't receive a single piece of jewelry, Rosa bitterly complains about Lucrezia's vast collection. Her father dismisses the jewels as crass inheritance from Lucrezia's mother, leaving Rosa stewing in furious jealousy. Boiling with envy, Rosa laments that Lucrezia unfairly gets the wonderful fiancé, gorgeous dresses, and endless fawning. Yielding to his daughter's tantrum, the father softly agrees to her demanding whims. He generously orders Rosa to buy whatever she likes, instantly shifting her mood to sheer joy. A tailor warns that the intricate design will take time, but Rosa demands it be covered in embroidery to match her Rosebud Princess nickname. Elsewhere, a distracted Lord Ramiro ignores a desperate voice begging him to listen. Snapped abruptly out of his deep thoughts, Ramiro flinches in sudden surprise. Quickly recovering his composure, he dismisses his distraction and asks what the person was just saying. Ramiro's mind immediately drifts right back to the mesmerizing image of Lucrezia's gentle smile. He silently agonizes over how utterly adorable she is, overwhelmed by the sheer unfairness of her beauty. A blushing Ramiro vividly remembers the striking elegance of her radiant silver hair. Lost in his deep infatuation, he yearns intensely for the chance to run his hands through her beautiful locks. Back to reality, Bosco hands over more letters demanding money, indicating the Duke of Serravail's dire financial straits. Bosco grimly reports that the Serravail household staff has been resigning one after another. Ramiro wonders if Lucrezia is secretly in league with her father's schemes, though he desperately hopes otherwise. Before he can fully question if she is lusting after his fortune, Lucrezia approaches and politely asks for a moment. Wearing a brand new dress, she informs Ramiro that the visiting priest has arrived at the manor's chapel. Impressed by her devotion, Ramiro listens as she nervously mentions needing to go to confession. Her expression darkens as she shamefully admits to doing something rather terrible. She quickly excuses herself, leaving a stunned Ramiro wondering if she feels guilty for deceiving him. Desperate for the truth, Ramiro secretly eavesdrops as Lucrezia begins her tearful confession in the chapel. To his utter shock, she confesses to the incredibly excessive sin of ordering 10 extravagant dresses the previous day. Relieved but deeply bewildered, Ramiro listens as she swears this is her first time being such a spendthrift. Lucrezia explains she had only ever worn plain dresses until now, mistakenly believing she actually preferred them. She tearfully admits that Ramiro's heartfelt compliment sparked a sudden, unstoppable adoration for cute clothes. Overcome with joy, she begs for divine forgiveness, crying that she simply couldn't stop herself from buying them all. Eavesdropping from the shadows, an overwhelmed Ramiro fiercely vows he would gladly buy her 200 dresses, completely dismissing the Duke's debt. A stern voice suddenly interrupts his euphoric state, bluntly asking if this whole situation is a marriage scam after all. Bosco reveals he confirmed with Sebastian that Lucrezia actually paid for everything using her own personal assets. Ramiro realizes they need to investigate further, questioning how an unmarried young lady could possess such vast independent funds. Bosco calculates that since they have only provided lodging and meals so far, the estate has lost absolutely nothing. Remiro agrees with this logical assessment, reasoning there is no cause for immediate concern if their wealth remains intact. Deciding the Duke's financial troubles can wait, Remiro plans to question Lucrezia himself, completely ignoring the massive pile of paperwork Bosco dumps on him. Left alone with his spiraling thoughts, Remiro admits he hasn't been able to stop thinking about Lucrezia since her arrival. He confesses his self-control slips away whenever she calls him husband, terrified by how hopelessly drawn he is to her. Later that weekend, Lucrezia greets him under clear skies, visibly relieved that the forecasted rain miraculously held off. Remiro steps forward and warmly agrees that the beautiful weather is absolutely perfect for their planned outing. Taking in her elaborate, highly decorated outfit, Remiro awkwardly asks if she is properly dressed for horseback riding. Lucrezia freezes in sheer embarrassment as she realizes her fashionable new dress is completely unsuited for the rugged wilderness. Feeling like a complete idiot, Lucrezia realizes her recently tailored dresses are terribly impractical for horseback riding. Realizing he forgot she arrived with barely a suitcase, Remiro silently curses his failure to ensure she had proper outdoor attire. Recognizing the wardrobe issue, Remiro calmly asks if they should completely change their outing plans. He suggests visiting his well-furnished country villa instead of the mountains, warning her that the several-hour carriage ride might be dull. Lucrezia cheerfully reassures him that the long trip won't be dull at all as long as she has his pleasant company. Struck by her overwhelming charm, Remiro secretly curses at how utterly adorable she is. Later at the villa, Lucrezia proudly presents bacon wrapped in crepes and invites him to try the dish he spoke so fondly of. Biting into the meal, Remiro marvels that the delicious flavor is far beyond anything he had imagined. Lucrezia's eyes sparkle with excitement as she mentions that grilled sugar confections are also absolutely lovely. She enthusiastically describes how grilling wafers with butter makes them crisp and urges him to try the sweet treat immediately. Patting his stomach, Remiro politely declines the offer by admitting he has already eaten far too much. Impressed by her diverse knowledge, he praises her remarkable versatility beyond her usual studies while she humbly credits her curious nature. When asked what to do with the leftovers, Lucrezia brilliantly suggests making jam and quickly goes to fetch a pot. As night falls and the stars emerge, Remiro declares they must stay the night since traveling in the dark is far too dangerous. Flustered by the sudden arrangement, Lucrezia awkwardly points out that they aren't even properly engaged yet. Realizing exactly how his words sounded, a panicked Remiro frantically assures her he has no inappropriate intentions whatsoever. Cursing his own awkwardness, Remiro desperately scrambles to think of something to say to break the heavy tension. Piercing the uncomfortable silence, Lucrezia looks at him directly and asks when he intends to marry her. Remiro solemnly remembers that she only came to his estate under her father's strict orders to deal with their crushing debt. Feeling deep pity for her situation, he gently tells her that she truly is a remarkably good girl. He firmly insists she tell her father that no beautiful woman should ever be forced to marry a hideous man like him. Gazing at him softly, Lucrezia simply replies that she doesn't find him hideous at all. She points out that despite the capital's ridiculous newspaper rumors claiming he has donkey ears, his ears are clearly quite ordinary. Shocked that such absurd rumors have spread so far, he listens silently as she notes his visible features are perfectly well formed. She explains her belief that physical appearance isn't inherently beautiful or ugly, but is completely shaped by how much we like a person. Recalling her golden-haired former fiancé, she admits that once he cheated on her, she could no longer see him as handsome. Reaching out her hand, she asks Lord Remiro to reveal his face, truly believing she would still find him beautiful. Struggling against his rising emotions, Remiro desperately warns himself not to lose control of the fragile situation. He deeply fears that if he reveals his true self, she will immediately run away just like all the others. Despite his overwhelming dread, he cannot pull away from her hand, desperately wishing to believe she might truly accept him. Remiro finally reveals his face, prompting her to gasp in surprise while he laughs bitterly at her reaction. Quickly recovering, Lucrezia insists she was merely startled and firmly declares that she actually finds him rather handsome. Observing his striking features, she realizes he simply has much stronger pigmentation than most people, quite the opposite of herself. She gazes intently at his unique features, noting the shocking visual contrast of his stark white hair and irises. Sharing her own past, She reveals she was born with very little pigment, resulting in pale eyes and poor vision until a healer intervened. She explains that her face remained expressionless during childhood because her blindness prevented her from learning expressions from others. Smiling with deep gratitude, she recalls how that skilled healer finally restored her precious sight at the age of 8. She fondly remembers how that miraculous, life-changing experience brought vibrant color into her once dark world. Staring into his unusual gaze, she softly notes that some people she once knew had eyes exactly like his. Startled by her observation, Ramiro listens in absolute shock as she confidently promises to find a way to treat his eyes if he grants her 1 month. Lucrezia earnestly pleads for Ramiro's absolute trust after so much time has passed without hope. She boldly promises to prepare everything for a summer treatment while Ramiro marvels at the impossible chance to erase his wretched marks. Arriving at the Rye Kingdom Embassy, Rosa nervously prepares for her first official diplomatic appearance as the next Marshal's wife. Lord Falco boldly praises her stunning appearance, confidently declaring he can barely resist confirming their love right this instant. Rosa pauses briefly, sensing that something feels undeniably odd about the atmosphere of the grand gathering. Lady Waja formally welcomes Rosa and Lord Falco to the plain event, graciously honoring their presence. A mysterious figure steps forward, sharply noting that Rosa hails from the Serave bloodline. Crown Prince Raish of Rye smoothly introduces himself, gallantly offering to escort the beautiful Rosa to the grand dining hall. Rosa blushes fiercely, immediately captivated by the prince's striking and handsome features. Flustered by his intense gaze, she nervously stammers a polite greeting about the lovely night. Prince Raish smiles charmingly and smoothly agrees with her simple observation. He casually compliments her impressive command of their native language. Rosa smugly gloats to herself, absolutely thrilled that she can manage this high-society interaction effortlessly. She graciously thanks Prince Raish for providing such an incredibly delightful evening. The prince expresses his gladness that Rye's exquisite cuisine perfectly suited her refined palate. Dismissing any unseemly behavior, Rosa arrogantly attributes any judgment to pure jealousy over her cute youth. Eager to advance her status, Rosa brazenly asks if she is allowed to speak further with His Highness. Lord Falco watches her shameless flirting with deep, brewing annoyance. The conversation violently shifts as someone questions what they were discussing earlier. Rosa enthusiastically praises the superb rabbit dish that the Crown Prince himself masterfully hunted during falconry. The prince suddenly shatters the pleasant mood by asking if anyone has ever eaten a falcon. Confusion ripples through the tense room as the bizarre question hangs heavily in the air. The prince notes an old legend speaks of eating falcons, expecting a laughing denial. Ignorant of the danger, Rosa marvels at the tale of a devoted man cooking his cherished falcon companion for his lady. The prince mocks her ignorance of her own country's tale, leaving a flustered Rosa begging him not to laugh. The conversation takes a sharp, dangerous turn as the prince presses further into the uncomfortable topic. Startled by a scandalous joke about eating Lord Falco, Rosa frantically denies the indecent accusation. Rosa foolishly blurts out that her desperate father once roasted and ate his beloved falcon for money. She ignorantly adds that her father completely despises all falcons since that horrific day. The prince laughs coldly at her family's penchant for exotic cuisine, sarcastically suggesting he try it too. A panicked Lord Falco violently grabs Rosa and drags her away from the dangerous prince. Lord Falco forcefully pulls a confused Rosa into a secluded area away from the prying eyes of the court. Ignoring his furious warning that she blundered badly, a clueless Rosa assumes he is merely blinded by jealousy. She arrogantly questions his sudden anger, completely oblivious to the massive political disaster she just caused. Falco viciously explains that falcons are sacred symbols to the Rye royal family, not mere birds. He crushes her pride by revealing her words were borderline blasphemy that deeply insulted their sacred traditions. A terrified Rosa realizes the prince only laughed it off because her cute appearance temporarily shielded her from his open anger. Prince Raish suddenly interrupts their panicked argument, tracking them down with a chilling calm. Brushing past Rosa's frantic apologies, the prince sharply inquires about her estranged sister. The prince demanding to know what Lucrezia is like after hearing she lost her bid for Falco's affections leaves Rosa stunned. Discussing a radiant woman compared to the sun, Lady Rosa complains that her sister is all pride and pretense, constantly criticizing her manners and calling her noisy. Mocking her siblings' plainness, Lady Rosa compares her sister to the gloomy moon, claiming her white hair is her only redeeming feature. The man quickly corrects her, explaining that in their nation, comparing someone to the moon is the highest compliment as their national crest proudly bears it. Lady Rosa fiercely argues that a sincere heart matters more than knowledge, questioning if someone so ignorant could handle diplomacy, which makes the man finally understand her sister's deep concerns. He recalls meeting her sister, noting she wore no jewels and hid her hair beneath a veil out of modesty, having meticulously researched their history to share an old falcon tale. Staring pointedly at Lady Rosa, he coldly questions if she could ever become like her refined sister. A tense silence follows the pointed question, leaving the atmosphere thick with unspoken weight. Breaking the tension, he dramatically apologizes for his unkindness, claiming he was merely teasing an unmarried young lady. Visibly irritated but composing herself, Lady Rosa sighs and reluctantly agrees to let his slight slide this one time. The man slyly pivots the conversation, declaring that the most beautiful moon in the land is actually his younger sister, Rija. An attendant introduces Rija, noting the girl is quite taken with Lord Falco's eyes and wishes for a closer look, leaving him deeply honored. Startled by the sudden attention, Lord Falco lets out a shocked exclamation of pure surprise. Seizing control of the moment, Rija smoothly invites Lady Rosa to step forward and learn exactly how adults play. A quiet pause settles over the room as the group prepares to engage in their dangerous social game. A harsh voice shatters the quiet, calling Lady Rosa astonishingly ignorant and confirming every prior suspicion about her severe lack of intellect. The relentless speaker notes that had it been her sister, she would have easily spotted the veiled insults skillfully woven throughout the banquet. They ruthlessly condemn Lady Rosa for being utterly ignorant of their sacred customs and completely devoid of necessary caution. The predator openly relishes the trap, declaring that such vulnerable prey makes the impending hunt infinitely more enjoyable. With a sinister and thrilling invitation, the grand hunt officially begins. Shifting to a tense medical scene, a determined woman entrusts herself to the procedure and officially announces the beginning of Lord Remirio's treatment. Plunged into pure darkness, Lord Remirio questions the gloom, prompting her to explain that light would act as a lethal poison to his eyes during the procedure. Yielding to her confident expertise, Lord Remirio places his complete trust in her judgment as she gently reassures him the task isn't particularly difficult. She meticulously explains that she gathered the specific ingredients and prepared the medicines strictly according to her grandmother's ancient notes. Highlighting her intense dedication, she boldly reveals that she personally tested every single component to ensure absolute safety. She gratefully acknowledges the manor staff for their helpful assistance throughout the entire rigorous preparation process. Fueled by Lord Remirio's unwavering trust, she silently vows that she absolutely must succeed for his sake. Steeling her fierce resolve, she utterly refuses to entertain the possibility of failure under any circumstances. Following the completed operation, Lord Remirio bravely endures the aching pain while she attentively checks on his fragile recovery. Despite the surprisingly straightforward surgery, she firmly warns him that the true challenge has only just begun. Lord Remirio learns he must endure this incapacitated state for the next grueling month while they consistently apply potent medicines. Stripped of his sight and unable to feed himself, he receives a comforting promise of soft, easily manageable meals. Shocked to his absolute core, he listens in complete disbelief as she pledges to personally care for him at all hours of the day. Vowing to act as his very hands and feet, she earnestly begs Lord Remirio to command her however he wishes. Trembling with flustered panic, he loudly protests that this overwhelming level of intimacy is completely unacceptable. Lord Remirio spirals into absolute dread, utterly convinced he will never survive if this intensely close arrangement continues. Instantly conceding to his extreme discomfort, she promises to assign all close contact tasks to the male staff wherever physically possible. Blushing furiously, she suddenly realizes the incredibly bold and wildly intimate nature of the sweeping claim she just made. Trying to justify her intense devotion, she awkwardly reminds Lord Remirio that she is indeed his legally chosen betrothed. She firmly insists there is absolutely nothing to be embarrassed about, as she came to this estate with the pure intention of becoming his wife. Lord Remirio hilariously fires back that wife or not, some specific things simply remain far too embarrassing to endure. Reminding him they haven't formally agreed to an engagement, Lucrezia watches Remirio with an adorable fondness. Frustrated by his relentless resistance, Lord Remirio furiously demands to know why she remains so fiercely stubborn on this matter. Distrustful of her intentions, Lord Ramiro bitterly suggests the entire medical treatment is a lethal ruse designed to poison him for his vast fortune. Striking a tense bargain, she demands a sincere apology once he fully recovers, prompting him to swear he will grovel at her feet. Blazing with unstoppable resolve, Lucrezia fiercely vows to heal the stubborn lord no matter the personal cost. Advancing the grueling healing process, several days pass before she gently announces it is finally time for his carefully prepared meal. Catering strictly to his personal tastes, she enthusiastically presents the exact hot rolls and soup he previously enjoyed. Leaning in with gentle authority, she softly instructs the blinded lord to open wide for the incoming bite. Startled by his sudden hesitation, she frantically worries she did something wrong until he awkwardly begs for a male attendant instead. Reassuring her shattered confidence, Ramiro nervously confesses that having such a lovely lady so intimately close leaves him terribly flustered. Conceding to his flustered request, she gracefully steps back to fetch drinks while a male attendant steps up to take her place. Taking over the delicate task, the male attendant dutifully offers the food and bluntly mimics her earlier instruction to say ah. Glaring through the crushing darkness, Lord Ramiro threatens to remember this indignity as the attendant aggressively orders him to open wide. Complaining bitterly about shouldering both estate work and care duties, the attendant gets instantly shut down as Ramiro fires the exact same complaint right back. Teasing the lord mercilessly, the attendant mocks Ramiro for squandering a perfect chance to be doted on by his darling bride. Clashing hands in a sudden clumsy exchange, Lucrezia fiercely apologizes for the accidental touch as she finally delivers his fresh water. A sudden, solitary sound breaks the otherwise complete stillness of the incredibly tense room. The narrative pauses completely, allowing a heavy and breathless silence to settle deeply over the pitch-black isolation of the room. Shattering the quiet atmosphere, the attendant casually interrogates them about when their official engagement will actually occur, prompting a loud denial. Observing the flustered pair with a knowing smirk, the attendant boldly whispers a sincere confession of absolute envy. Fleeing the unbearable embarrassment, Lucrezia abruptly excuses herself to seek refuge and a short prayer in the distant chapel. Analyzing her sudden piety, the men intensely debate if she bears a heavy burden that drives her recent devotion in the confessional. Unveiling the shocking truth, the attendant gleefully reveals she is deeply troubled by her blazing jealousy over a certain man constantly surrounded by retainers. Struck breathless by the earth-shattering revelation, Ramiro stammers in complete and utter disbelief. Outraged by the blatant manipulation, Ramiro furiously scolds his retainer for knowing the truth yet still deliberately stringing him along for sheer amusement. Calling his retainer an insufferable man, Ramiro absorbs the sage advice that sometimes bold, unrelenting passion is exactly what true love requires. Defending his rigid honor, Ramiro fiercely insists he is a gentleman who refuses to succumb to temptation, even as his retainer urges him to stop resisting. Striking a deeply emotional chord, the retainer firmly reminds the blind lord that he, above anyone else, should profoundly appreciate her unwavering devotion. Crumpling under the overwhelming weight of truth, Ramiro softly and reluctantly admits his own agonizing awareness of the romantic situation. Flashing forward an entire grueling month, Lucrezia dramatically removes the bandages and proudly declares the ambitious treatment an absolute success. Staring into a polished mirror with wide-eyed shock, Ramiro marvels at his fully restored face and the miraculous medicine that actually altered his eye color. Overflowing with boundless joy and gratitude, Ramiro excitedly declares they must immediately throw a grand celebration to honor Lucrezia's incredible victory. Bowing his head in deep, shameful regret, Ramiro desperately begs for her forgiveness while admitting he truly owes her his very life. Seizing the explosive emotional momentum, she boldly demands that their impending engagement announcement be just as grand and splendid as his recovery celebration. Clashing in a final, fiery battle of wills, Ramiro loudly protests for her own safety before throwing his hands up and finally conceding utter defeat. Shedding his stubborn armor completely, Ramiro sincerely apologizes for his foolish lack of confidence while she warmly admires his genuine emotional expression. Showering him with radiant affection, Lucrezia smoothly assures the blushing lord that unwavering confidence perfectly suits a man as undeniably charming as him. Teasing him relentlessly, she enthusiastically suggests inviting the newspapers to crown him the handsome duke, prompting a hilariously frantic and embarrassed refusal. Flipping the narrative with absolute triumph, She vows to smile fiercely at those who once mocked him as the ugly duke and showcase his true, breathtaking magnificence. Sealing their beautiful new future, Remiro proudly accepts a full ensemble from head to toe and smoothly promises to prepare a stunning gift for her in return. Brushing off her generous offer with a warm smile, Duke Remiro firmly insists he already possesses more than enough wealth. Overcome with profound emotion, Lucrezia rejoices as Remiro proudly declares his fierce desire to parade his unimaginably beautiful wife before the entire world. Beaming with absolute joy and devotion, Lucrezia eagerly accepts his heartfelt proposal now that he has finally embraced her wholeheartedly. Shifting abruptly to the royal private chambers, King Rex III furiously berates a cowering Falco Alberighi for his inexcusable audacity. Glaring down with terrifying royal fury, the king sternly demands to know if Falco actually dared to lay hands on the Rye Crown Prince's sister. A striking and ominous vision of Crown Prince Raish flashes as the catastrophic weight of the political scandal crashes down upon the room. Stammering through a pathetic defense of his pleasant evening, Falco is swiftly crushed when the king declares his guilty silence speaks volumes. Shocked to his absolute core, Falco desperately questions the severe diplomatic backlash while clutching his head in sheer panic. Delivering the ultimate, inescapable death blow, the unyielding monarch coldly reveals that the Rye delegation specifically demands Falco's immediate execution. Panicking over his sudden doom, Falco learns that taking a maiden's virtue in Rye is an unforgivable crime universally punishable by death. Recoiling in abject terror, the disgraced noble is ruthlessly mocked for his fatal, foolish ignorance of basic international common knowledge. Realizing he is the ultimate political scapegoat, Falco begs for his release while the king fiercely prioritizes saving decades of fragile diplomacy. Groveling pathetically on the grand stone floor, Falco frantically pleads with his majesty and utterly refuses to accept his grim execution. Shutting down Falco's pathetic excuses of ignorance, the disappointed king fiercely mocks his constant, cowardly refrains of never being taught. Weeping for a lesser sentence, Falco begs for any other punishment only to face the monarch's chilling, absolute disappointment. Sealing the miserable traitor's fate forever, the king mercilessly commands him to die for his unforgivable transgressions. Frozen in utter disbelief, the condemned man gasps as his impending execution transforms into an inescapable, brutal reality. Shifting to a terrified Lady Rosa, her furious father brandishes a damning document while she cowers backward in absolute fear. Slamming the paper down with violent rage, her father screams that they have received a massive national grievance directly from Rye's fierce ambassador. Confronted for calling sacred falcon meat foul to the crown prince, a terrified Rosa pathetically claims she didn't realize their holy status. Ruthlessly tearing apart her excuse of ignorance, her father fiercely reveals that her catastrophic diplomatic blunders do not end there. Reminding her of Falco's unspeakable crimes, her father blasts Rosa for insulting Rye's sacred moon emblem and maliciously slandering the peace-seeking Lucrezia. Exploding with rage over the stacked offenses, he screams that Rye now views them as bitter enemies and will inevitably declare a bloody war. Dropping a mind-blowing and devastating revelation, he grimly declares that the naive girl was masterfully set up by their cunning rivals. Analyzing the grim geopolitical landscape, he explains how Illuminati's wealthy trade ports make them prime, highly vulnerable targets for conquest. Crushing Rosa's remaining sliver of hope, he snarls that her foolish arrogance handed their aggressive enemies the perfect excuse to invade. Expressing his total and utter disappointment, he shames Rosa for failing disastrously where the brilliant Lucrezia easily avoided conflict. Spiraling into desperate delusion, Rosa shrieks that Crown Prince Raish is entirely at fault for cruelly deceiving her genuine affections. Sobbing uncontrollably on the floor, the broken girl realizes she was nothing but a disposable pawn in a ruthless political game. Delivering the final, crushing blow to their legacy, her father formally announces that the king has officially ordered their noble titles stripped. Cursing the spineless monarch, he reveals their high status will be cowardly passed down to the younger brother to desperately appease Rye. Trembling with horrific realization, Rosa nervously asks if her grand, highly anticipated engagement to Lord Falco has been permanently severed. Shattering her last delusion, her father coldly reveals that Falco is currently a fleeing fugitive with an inescapable death sentence on his head. Reeling from the deadly consequences, they realize the powerful Marshal and his wife arrived far too late to stop the impending disaster. Staring into a doomed future, the disgraced noble warns that without the Marshal's leadership, their lands will be completely engulfed by the coming war. Panicking over their impending destruction, the ruined family violently resolves to abandon everything and flee to safety immediately. Transitioning to the bustling city streets, excited commoners eagerly watch a massive, opulent parade of noble carriages rolling out. Buzzing with thrilling gossip, the crowd gleefully shouts that today marks Duke Ramiro's glorious recovery and highly anticipated engagement celebration. Standing proudly before the massive elite crowd, a radiant Lucrezia smoothly introduces herself as the Duke's triumphant and official fiancé. Greeting the aristocratic guests with absolute grace, Lucrezia slyly inquires about the highly suspicious absence of Duke Pastor. Shattering the quiet atmosphere, an unseen speaker firmly declares that there are absolutely no more excuses left to hide behind. Seeking to pacify the eager crowd, an attendant politely asks for a bit more patience since Lord Ramiro is still incredibly hesitant to appear publicly without his veil. Understanding his painful hesitation, Lucrezia graciously offers to entertain the waiting guests, warmly recalling how she also once hid her face behind a heavy veil. Suddenly shifting the room's energy, a dramatic voice boldly announces that Lord Ramiro is finally right here. Turning around in utter astonishment, Lucrezia gasps in absolute awe as she beholds her lord's breathtaking arrival. Blushing furiously, Ramiro awkwardly admits he isn't quite used to this exposure, while Lucrezia warmly praises his wonderfully tailored attire. Stepping forward with absolute grace, Lucrezia warmly asks the flustered Duke to formally escort her this time. Playfully teasing her blushing partner, she links their arms securely as the eager announcer loudly cues the grand entrance music. Exploding into a buzzing frenzy, the massive ballroom erupts with excited murmurs as the stunning couple officially makes their grand entrance. Shocked gasps ripple through the stunned crowd as they absolutely refuse to believe this magnificent, handsome man is the infamous ugly Duke. Taking absolute command of the room, Ramiro proudly announces that his beloved fiancé's unwavering devotion has fully cured his long-suffering eye affliction. Raising a triumphant glass to the heavens, the eager crowd passionately toasts to the Duke's bright future and newfound miraculous recovery. Clearing the floor for the main event, a breathless and electrifying anticipation sweeps through the grand hall. Overflowing with immense joy, Lucrezia secretly wishes to jot this perfect moment in her diary as the eager crowd loudly demands a celebratory dance. Breathing a heavy sigh of sheer exhaustion, the couple successfully concludes their dazzling, high-stakes ballroom performance. Swarming the freshly recovered Duke, ambitious nobles aggressively offer their congratulations and forcefully attempt to pair him with their own daughters. Flustered by the sudden overwhelming onslaught, Ramiro stammers nervously while the pushy nobles boldly insist he entertain everyone as the guest of honor. Snapping with sudden possessive fury, Ramiro loudly rejects the greedy suitors just as another gentleman smoothly asks Lady Lucrezia for a dance. Exploding into immediate action, a fiercely jealous Ramiro suddenly yanks Lucrezia away from the startling crowd and right into his arms. Declaring his absolute devotion, Ramiro fiercely announces that since she finally agreed to marry him, he is the only man she will dance with tonight. Retreating awkwardly, the rejected suitor politely excuses himself while a deeply embarrassed Ramiro begs Lucrezia to spare him the impending lecture. Pulling her into a remarkably tender and silent embrace, the flustered Duke desperately hides his heavily blushing face from the world. Melting into his surprisingly warm hold, Lucrezia softly corrects him and genuinely confesses that his bold display of jealousy actually made her incredibly happy. Stunned by her incredibly sweet confession, Ramiro softly admits he feared she was still painfully reluctant about their sudden public engagement. Blushing wildly under her gaze, Ramiro frantically confesses that he has absolutely no idea how to act natural around a woman as breathtakingly pretty as her. Gazing up at his beautifully flustered expression, a profound realization strikes Lucrezia that this incredibly powerful man genuinely needs her. Reflecting on her past heavy burdens, she silently realizes that she has always been helplessly weak to the feeling of being deeply relied upon. Embracing her true commanding nature, she acknowledges that running vast estates and earning high praise always gave her immense, undeniable fulfillment. Interrupting the tender romantic atmosphere, a swarm of aggressive reporters suddenly closes in to demand the exact medical details of his miraculous treatment. Glaring at the approaching crowd, Lucrezia sharply recognizes them as the exact same cunning, snake-like reporters who once cruelly branded him the ugly Duke. Masking her fierce protective instincts, Lucrezia flashes a brilliant, polite smile and smoothly invites the hungry journalists to speak in complete privacy. Spinning a masterful public narrative, Lucrezia dramatically claims the Duke's pious, monk-like lifestyle naturally compelled the heavens to answer his prayers. Trying to interject the actual scientific truth, Remiro stubbornly insists her incredible herbal remedy was the true, singular cause of his magically restored sight. Stepping heavily on his foot to forcefully silence him, Lucrezia aggressively pivots the narrative back to his divine prayers, leaving the reporters absolutely fascinated. Analyzing his painful social vulnerability, Lucrezia fiercely resolves to protect her brutally honest lord from offering the cunning press anything they could easily exploit. Bowing with practiced aristocratic grace, she successfully concludes the chaotic interview and politely thanks them for eagerly sharing his grand story. Reassuring her highly nervous fiancé, she explains they thoroughly bribed the reporters with generous gifts, though Remiro still grimly wonders how they will twist the facts. Radiating a terrifying, intensely dark aura, Lucrezia coldly promises to deal with the reporters personally if they ever dare to slander her beloved Duke again. Shifting abruptly to a distant, bitter estate, Lady Rosa furiously mocks the newly published newspaper article that beautifully romanticizes the newly restored Duke and her sister. Sneering with bitter, absolute jealousy, Rosa angrily dismisses the grand romantic tale as nothing more than a cheap, heavily bribed scheme crafted by a greedy social climber. Plotting their next move, Lady Rosa eagerly asks her father what they should do now that they have cut ties. Gloating over the glittering jewels Lucrezia left behind, her father proudly claims the treasure will set them up for life. Shifting the scene, the two ambitious nobles arrive at a dusty antiques and curiosities shop to cash in their newfound wealth. Inspecting the gems through his loupe, the appraiser coldly crushes their dreams by declaring the stones are absolute fakes. Elaborating on the forgery, he explains they are flawless glass imitations that even royalty might wear undetected, but remain completely worthless. Sliding a meager pouch of coins across the counter, the appraiser bluntly states this is the absolute best he can offer. Furious at the sudden betrayal, Rosa loudly protests that her father-in-law had a world-class artisan craft real jewels. Recalling Lucrezia's parting request to take care of the gems, the father angrily realizes she knew they were fakes all along. Boiling with pure outrage, he fiercely deduces that the real, priceless jewels must be securely hidden with her loyal steward. Hatching a greedy new scheme, he eagerly suggests they pay a visit to this so-called Beauty and the Beast to reclaim their stolen wealth. Transitioning to a brutal construction site, laborers toil endlessly under the scorching sun in a dramatic shift of scenery. Shouting furiously, an angry overseer reprimands a distracted laborer who is shockingly revealed to be the ruined and disgraced Falco. Snapping back to his harsh reality, Falco hastily apologizes as the overseer mercilessly commands him to get back to work. Sweating under the heavy, agonizing labor, Falco bitterly wonders how his once grand life ended up reduced to this miserable state. Filled with crushing regret, he realizes he wouldn't be living in misery if he had just stayed engaged to Lucrezia and avoided angering the crown prince. Deflecting his own massive guilt, he fiercely blames that scheming brat Rosa for orchestrating his absolute and humiliating downfall. Deluding himself into believing Lucrezia's marriage to the ugly duke must be miserable, he desperately convinces himself she will forgive his cheating. Fueled by this pathetic hope, he resolves to cross the border and go straight to her just as his grueling break time ends. Transitioning back to the Grand Pastor estate, Lord Remiro relaxes gracefully in his study while loyal attendants wait upon him. Staring at the Duke's striking and refined face, an attendant marvels that absolutely no one could ever call him ugly now. Breaking the quiet atmosphere, the attendant dutifully informs his lord that a vagrant was causing a massive scene at the estate gate. Continuing his report, he reveals the beggar claimed to be Falco and demanded to see Lady Lucrezia before they forcefully turned him away. Remembering his past connection to Lucrezia, Remiro stares out the window and expresses a surprisingly solemn hope that the former fiancé is all right. Flipping his demeanor instantly, Remiro fiercely orders his men to hunt Falco down and forcefully return him to the marshal. Refusing to inform Lucrezia, Remiro coldly states he won't allow her kind heart to beg for his protection and cause unnecessary complications. Shifting his attention to estate matters, Remiro casually opens a newly arrived letter sealed by Duke Sarah. Scoffing at the sheer absurdity, Remiro notes that after cruelly casting her out, Lucrezia's greedy father now actually wants to call her back. Warning his lord of legal loopholes, the retainer explains that under Illuminati law, an unconsummated marriage without parental consent could be easily annulled in court. Struck by a sudden, brilliant realization, Remiro excitedly pieces together a flawless plan to secure their unbreakable future. Shocking his loyal retainer, Remiro commands him to immediately summon a priest and prepare a modest ceremony so they can marry before her father even arrives. Arguing against rushing the ceremony, Remiro's loyal retainer fiercely insists that a proper wedding is absolutely sacred to a woman. Driven by intense insecurity, Remiro stubbornly declares that Lucrezia will definitely leave him if they wait any longer. Vowing to secure their unbreakable future, the anxious Duke resolves to explain everything and thoroughly convince his beloved bride. Spiraling into deep paranoia, Remiro worries that if she can boldly defy her own father, she might easily choose to abandon him. Trembling with excitement over her brand-new diary, Lucrezia gleefully wonders what incredible stories she should write first. Staring intently at the blank paper, she fiercely determines that the very first page must completely hook the eager reader. Interrupting her plotting, Lord Remiro suddenly appears at the doorway and politely asks to speak with her. Startled by his highly solemn expression, Lucrezia nervously stammers and asks if something is terribly wrong. Observing his unusual demeanor, she internally notes that her usually composed lord is acting incredibly strange. Fearing she somehow upset him, Lucrezia is shocked when Remiro sadly apologizes for being born with pale skin and lifeless eyes. Outraged by his cruel family, Lucrezia furiously demands to know who called him unpleasant before gently confessing she finds him rather cute. Bearing his deep emotional scars, Remiro painfully reveals that his abusive family always claimed his mere presence made them violently sick. Unveiling his tragic past, he quietly explains that his real mother died in childbirth and a ruthless plague claimed the rest of his family. Struck by their shared sorrow, Remiro gently notes that the two of them are actually incredibly alike. Confessing his initial feelings, he softly admits that he deeply pitied her when he first read her heartbreaking letters. Believing she despised their arranged marriage, Remiro desperately vows he would do absolutely anything just to ensure her true happiness. Melted by his incredible kindness, Lucrezia firmly reassures the insecure Duke that she is fiercely standing by his side completely by choice. Reaching out with unconditional support, she warmly begs him to trust her entirely and share whatever heavy burdens trouble his heart. Resolving to trust her completely, Remiro suddenly shifts his tone and intensely demands that she agree to his next words without any question. Dropping an absolute bombshell, he fiercely declares that they are getting married tomorrow and demands she officially become his wife. Shocked by his sudden fiery dominance, Lucrezia listens breathlessly as he passionately confesses he simply cannot wait any longer. Promising a breathtaking future, he smoothly assures her they will still hold a grand parade, banquet, and proper cathedral ceremony afterward. Overriding her flustered hesitation, Remiro confidently declares the sudden impromptu marriage completely settled. Overwhelmed by sheer happiness and panic, Lucrezia masterfully decides to play the proper lady and dramatically faints straight into his frantic arms. Drifting into a blissful swoon, she gleefully concludes that this perfectly dramatic romantic scene will definitely captivate her descendants for generations.